I was gonna say, does that movie is that kind of along the lines of like Faust and like Haxan in a way? Like,
Kinda in
yeah,
terms of the visual, because if you know the story of Dante's Inferno about the man who goes to the 7 levels of hell to, I guess, save
right.
his loved one, something like that. Um, but yeah, it's a pretty wild film to say in terms of visuals, like how they made this that far back in film history. It's
All right. Well, hey everyone. My name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and this is the Film Journey, where I have a guest from the community coming on to talk about all things films and also their life with movies in general. And this time, I got CK on the channel. Chris, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, just getting through life as most people.
Yeah, a lot of things going on in real world. That's why we go to movies, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've known you for a long, long time. I feel like we've been on each other's like channels, like in the comment section, for like what, 4 or 5 years now.
It feels that way. I mean, I first discovered you when you did that. What was it? Your 100 years of cinema, where you list your favorite films from each year or something like
Yeah.
that. That's how I first discovered your channel. So
Well, I was gonna say you've done some pretty big, kind of things along those lines, or at least in the way that you have put stuff together. I know you've done like a heroes and versus villains, um, you know, uh, pretty big project that's been like continuous, right?
yeah, and I might bring that up in a little bit if you want to ask me what my YouTube channel
Yeah.
is about. So
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, but no, it's nice to finally meet you, and I'm glad that we've crossed paths, just being on each other's videos and just and being in the comment section. So it's nice to finally have you on the channel and also just to talk to you. So
yeah, it's a pleasure.
yeah. Well, speaking of your channel, do you want to tell us real quick for the people who are watching this right now, what your channel is and what you do?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I've had my channel since 2011. Originally, actually, I don't remember exactly why I originally got my channel. It was because the first video I ever uploaded was for like an online class I did for college. It was like a communications class.
Yeah.
Eventually, I decided to do random stuff with it. Most of my content, honestly, what people are subscribed for my channel for is, as you mentioned, my Heroes was a Villain series. That's like my big thing on my channel. For those who aren't aware, it's basically a fan fiction type series, you could say, where I it's edited footage from in the case of season one, it was using Disney and non-Disney animated movies and use footage to make it look like characters are interact with each other or find each other, and there is a story to it. So I finished season one back in 2019, and that was like the biggest project I had to do because the finale was had to be split into 5 videos, and the entire thing together was like 3 hours and 15 minutes long. So
That's an undertaking.
yeah, and now I'm on season two, which I haven't worked on in quite some time because, well, as embarrassed it is to say, it's procrastination. That's tends to be the worst enemy as a content creator.
Yeah, I
But
get that.
it's that and also burnout from real life stuff like your job. Like when you get home from a long day or even a long week of work and you just want to lay around and not do much, like just or do something
Mhm.
that makes you feel at ease or relaxed. Whether watch films or shows, play games, do whatever. It's binge watch your favorite YouTube channels. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well, it's very, I mean, this whole week I've been feeling that little bit burnout myself.
yeah.
And it's just,
But
week one of February.
regarding season two, where I'm doing now is now I'm including television, computer animated, and live action Disney and non-Disney characters. So it's a much bigger project, as you imagine. If anyone's seen the trailers I put together for season two, you can see what I mean. But
Yeah, I was gonna,
that
yeah, go on. Sorry.
no, you can go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, speaking of animation, I'm sure we're gonna get into it, but I know
Yeah,
that's
we
like
will.
a really big, thing for you,
Yeah.
and a lot of the stuff that you make, and also just like the lists that you put together, and then also probably some of the pickups that you get too, because you do haul videos as well.
Yes. Um, but yeah, that's the thing most of my people go for. Those are the videos that get the most comments and likes and views and whatnot. Regarding whenever I do anything movie related, it doesn't seem to get as much attention for the most part. But like I said, every now and then when I feel up to it, I do something movie related, whether it's like what I've been recently doing with my top 30 favorite films per whatever year. It started out when I did it for my birth year in 1993. I decided to do it for the birth years of my other family members. I did one for my dad in 1959. I did one for my brother, which is the year 2000. And I'm currently working on the one for 1964 for my mom. And once I'm done with that, I am thinking about trying to do all the other years from oldest to latest, I think. Although I'm considering probably trying to knock the 2020s out while we're still relevant, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you get you're interacting with like your family as well, like in a
Yeah.
way, like you're putting them maybe not necessarily in front of the camera, but like putting their year in perspective of film. Like that's a cool, like almost like a, I don't know, like a some kind of honorable kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a nice sentiment. Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically what my channel is for the most part. I mean, I feel ashamed I haven't done a whole lot these past couple years. I mean, the most I do is the monthly Blu-ray update haul sort of thing. That's about all it is. I just do that just to ensure everyone that I'm still active, I guess you could say. Like it's just a little thing that's easy to get out quickly while I'm currently working on the big stuff. So yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, obviously for the people watching right now, and for the things that you just mentioned, like obviously, for there's the links down in the description for your channel. So if anyone who's watching this right now, you want to check out Chris's work and continuous work, even if it's just updates on Blu-rays. There, I mean, there's projects involved, and like he said,
yes, I do have a few ideas. I do have a few ideas in the future, which I might get into later in this chat. I will say I did make a playlist for my Heroes of the Villain series if anyone's curious to binge watch that thing. Although I should mention a couple of rounds, unfortunately, I think are currently blocked due to some copyright in terms of music. So I think I made a link to like WeTransfer or something so people could watch that. So, but
yeah,
that's always a pain. But
yeah, I was gonna say copyright definitely, especially with like animation. I'm sure is.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably know about the back end of that, but
yeah, especially when I'm including DreamWorks movies, that's always a pain right there. Right? How I use the footage. So
yeah.
But anyway, enough of that. So
yeah,
I guess
I was gonna say
my history of film then.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. That's normally my first question is kind of those early memories of movies and film and TV. Do you have any like things that come to mind when it comes to like first memories that happened?
In terms of movies, I want to say the first movie that my parents ever showed me, it was either The Jungle Book or The Wizard of Oz. It was one of those films. In terms of the first movie they took me to see in theaters, they said it was The Lion King, but I would have been a year old, so my memory is very skeevy about that. But the oldest memory I could recollect, and again, this is very vague, is when they took me to see Toy Story a year later. So that's what it is. Yeah, in terms of growing up with film, most of my memory is just with the Disney and Pixar stuff. Basically, mostly a lot of the animated stuff. When it's not Disney, it's usually some like the Don Bluth films or what other animated films were around at the time during the 90s that I watched. And if it wasn't animated, I honestly, I was more of a television person as a kid than a movie person. Like I watched like Toon Disney, when it was called Toon Disney back in the day.
Yeah.
And Disney Channel and PBS Kids, stuff like that. Although in terms of shows, I mean, I watched a lot of course, typical children's stuff like Sesame Street and Mister Rogers' Neighborhood. And one of my biggest childhood stuff that I used to watch a lot of Thomas the Tank Engine. That was like my biggest thing in my childhood. In fact, I still own all the VHSs I used to collect as a kid. So that was a big part of my childhood right there. So yeah, sort of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you I was gonna say you have those VHSs. Did you I guess when you were growing up, did you collect anything, or did your family like get VHSs, or did you go to places, or did you mostly watch cable or like go to movies?
We mainly collected VHSs. That was our thing when it comes to movies and whatnot. I owned pretty much a good chunk of the Disney classics on those clamshell VHS tapes. The Disney ones always get those like special.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like
this that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Something what's interesting though is a couple of those VHSs I owned, specifically like I owned Peter Pan, Sleeping Beauty, and Bambi. Those three specifically, the VHS I had came with a 15-minute long vignette at the end, which goes into the history behind those movies. And even as a kid, I always loved watching those because I thought it was really cool to see the history of how those films were made, especially back how long ago they were made. Like as a kid, it never crossed my mind that Bambi came out in 1942. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I figured that out until I was like a young adult, which
yeah,
is wild because yeah, you wouldn't expect that to be so old, right?
yeah,
Relatively.
yeah, it's something like that. And so yeah, I'm trying to think. In terms of more live action media, the most I watched was things like Wizard of Oz, as I mentioned before, Willy Wonka, any Disney live action movies like Mary Poppins and Benoms and Broomsticks, Old Yeller, Homeward Bound. It wasn't until I got a little older, I suppose, because I'm trying to think what was the first PG-13 rated film I saw. I want to say it was either National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation because my parents watched that a lot during the Christmas time, and even then my memory is so vague on that. I just remember the cartoon segment in the opening, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but it was either that or Jurassic Park. So um, that was the first. Because another thing you should not know about me, there's two things I have a passion for in life: movies and animals. And as a kid, I've always loved animals, especially prehistoric animals. I was always into dinosaur related media. So yeah, anything with dinosaurs I watched as a kid, be it Jurassic Park or The Land Before Time or any whatever like prehistoric documentary that came out at the time, like Walking with Dinosaurs and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I watched. Which,
Did
speaking of
you?
which, I'm definitely interested to see what that new Walking with Dinosaurs will be like coming out this year.
What? I haven't. I actually haven't caught up with those in a long time. So, like, what? I can't remember who puts that out. Is it the BBC?
Yeah, it was BBC. It came out in
Okay.
1999. It was a six-part miniseries.
Yeah,
I
that's the
rewatched
one
it
I know.
last. I rewatched it last year because it was the 25th anniversary of the show, and it still holds up. Well, in terms of like the technological aspect, I mean, sure, a lot of the facts are outdated, but for the
Sure.
time period, it was accurate. So yeah, I used
Well,
to watch stuff like that. And when I did watch television stuff that related to like cartoons or whatever, I used to watch a lot of documentaries on Animal Planet and Discovery Channel. I watched Crocodile Hunter or Jeff Corn or The Most Extreme. That was a huge part of my childhood as well. So
yeah. I mean, you're mirroring a lot of the stuff that I did because I was obsessed with dinosaurs growing up. And I right now I'm reading Jurassic Park, or at least
yeah.
reading The Lost World, which long overdue. But
Yeah, funny enough, I
I-
still never got around reading the books. I mean, I have the first book in my bookshelf in my room. I just never got around to it yet. But yeah, Jurassic Park was a huge part of my childhood, and I admit even to this day, I still have kind of a soft spot for Lost World and JB3, even though I acknowledge they are
I do
stepped down to
too.
the first movie. And I'm one of those people that did not care for the Jurassic World trilogy. It's
Neither do I. I'm
like
on your I'm on your side here.
I mean, the first Jurassic World I thought was, I mean, it wasn't great, but it
It's
had
okay.
moments, I suppose.
Yeah.
But then they just got worse after that. I will say if there's one thing I did like to come out of the Jurassic World franchise, it's Jurassic World Evolution. I've loved playing those games. It's basically reminds me of the days I used to play Zoo Tycoon when I was a kid. So, except way
Yeah,
more
I
advanced.
played Zoo Tycoon too.
Yeah, I still own those games. So,
I
but yeah,
think my dad has them somewhere.
yeah. But yeah, it was that, and I haven't finished it yet. But I started watching the Netflix series Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, the animated series they did, and because I've heard people say it's actually a pretty good show. From what I've seen so far, it's pretty good. I have to admit, I'm surprised that it ends up being way better than the movie so far.
Is that the kids show? I can't remember.
Yeah, but I will
They're-
say, and not only
it's
basically
like
because
young adult.
I've only
Yeah.
seen season one, and based on what I've seen, yeah, it is technically aimed to young audience, but I am impressed. It still has a body count. I mean, most of the body.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I was no, the
I mean,
reason I
most
was asking is because I've seen it. I think I was over at a friend's place who has like a kid, but at the same time they really enjoyed it too, and I just didn't know if that was the same show. So
yeah, like I said, I'm been meaning to get back to it because I'm just curious to see where it goes, especially with the sequel series Chaos Theory. But yeah, that and speaking of Jurassic World, the trailer for Rebirth came out recently, which I will say I'm not so sure at the moment, but the fact that Gareth Edwards is directing it, as in the
that's
director
something.
of Godzilla 2014, Rogue One. I haven't seen The Creator. I've heard mixed things about that movie.
I like it.
Yeah,
But
so I'm thinking, consider he's directing it, and they got the guy who wrote the original Jurassic Park to write this film. I'm thinking, okay, maybe, just maybe.
yeah,
If you don't care
well,
much, like even though they don't seem to care to tell a story that makes any sense whatsoever, at least try to be somewhat entertaining. Like if you just want to be a monster movie about them trying to survive on the island or something, like
I mean, that's what I like about 3 is it feels like a horror movie, right?
yeah, at times,
Like that's what I give. Much like you, 2 and 3 are. I give a little bit of a pass to because
yeah,
like there is like they're fun, honestly.
yeah,
And they're not necessarily as good as the first, obviously.
no,
Um,
obviously,
but yeah, much like you, I'm in the same boat. So,
yeah. And speaking
um,
of three, so after in the trailer, so yeah, it's confirmed the Spinosaurus from the are returning in the rebirth. Although I guess they have a different design now. From the way it looks, they're going to be more accurate to more updated depictions of the animal.
well, good. Yeah, I haven't seen the
So
trailer, so I'm actually going to watch that after
yeah,
this. So,
yeah. Like I'm not getting
um,
my hopes up yet, but I'm thinking maybe, hopefully, this might be a slight improvement, at least in terms of a summer blockbuster, something for fun, maybe something that I
yeah,
felt these
exactly.
recent ones did not give me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, I guess pivoting from growing up and watching a lot of those VHSs and having a lot of those and watching TV shows,
yeah.
what was your like young adult like life like in terms of like growing up with this stuff that you already loved? Like, was there like an aha moment during that like growth period that you're like, I really
Um,
love this medium?
I don't know. I'm trying to think because growing up throughout the 2000s, I still did continue to watch Disney films, well, at least in the first part of the 2000s, because this was a time when Disney they still put out good stuff. I thought, with The Emperor's New Groove, Lilo and Stitch, um,
Monsters
Treasure
Inc.
Planet. Well, that's Pixar, but you get the
Oh,
idea. Like the
yeah, yeah.
Pixar film, Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Like I did like those films. I think they're probably some more underrated films, but obviously during the middle part of 2000 when they kind of had a slum throughout that period, and then until 2009 when Princess and the Frog came out. So I still watched those, and I'm trying to think of some other stuff I watched because obviously I still watched other animated films that came out around that time. Obviously with Pixar and some of the DreamWorks films that came out, like Shrek, and I even remember watching the Madagascar films, like stuff like that. Um, in terms of live action, I guess of course it was the decade that brought us the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which I still do enjoy. I mean, the first film obviously, and this 2 and 3 again are kind of a soft spot for me.
Yeah,
So
same.
so trying to think what else. Obviously in my teen years, like let's be honest, we all went through that age where we did not have the best taste in movies, I guess you can say. Like they're films you liked when you're young, but then you grow up and you look back and it's like, why did I like this again? I
Yeah.
think we've all been through that. Like I often ask myself this important question because obviously when you're a kid, you like everything you watch. You haven't developed the ability to, analyze and think about these things you watch. I had to stop and think to myself, what was the first movie that I saw as a kid that made me think, wow, this is terrible? Like, well, this was actually terrible. I try to think that, and the closest thing I could think of was the Cat in the Hat, the Mike Myers movie. I didn't see it in theaters because even I had no interest in seeing that. It was later on, I think it was on television or something that I saw it, and yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it's
But
rough. Save a
but
few moments.
like
That's about it.
obviously when I was a teen, I was that age where because I would have been like in high school, I was in the late 2000s, around the time when things like Michael Bay's Transformers was like the thing, and like I admit, I do remember. I don't remember falling in love with it like most people at the time. I just remember thinking, whatever, dumb robot movie fighting, I guess. But looking back, it's the best of the Michael Bay Transformer films, but that's not really saying a whole lot.
Hmm.
It's yeah, looking back, it's not great.
Do you have any like specific like theater experiences that you remember like around that time?
And the closest I could think of is I can't remember which one. It was one of the Star Wars prequels. I remember my mom and a relative, well, not really, it was like a friend of the family took us to see. It was either Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith. The only thing I remember at the time is I remember the theater we were at was like really cold. Like it was really cold. And it was because of that experience. My mom usually brings a blanket with her every time she goes to the theater. So,
Yeah. Well, I was
so
gonna say, thinking about like all those animated and also like non-animated, like live action films.
Yeah.
Transitioning into like the early 2010s, you had mentioned that you got your first, like your YouTube channel, right? Obviously, it was
Yeah,
for
it
more for
was.
university, but when did it pivot to like to movies and like the stuff that you're passionate about?
Well, ignoring the heroes versus villains thing for a moment, in terms of like my what I've I will say my interest in film. I think it technically started with discovering YouTube channels like Chris Stuckman, like Your Movie Sucks, and then later on people like Misfit Pond and you that really got me to think, wow, there's so much more than what Hollywood has to offer. So, and then it wasn't until I took my film class in college in 2017. It was a literature class, but for film, and it was there. I think that started to really get me more interested in film and well, that and also discovering whenever people show off their Blu-ray collection and think, that's a pretty neat idea. So it was around November of 2017 when I officially decided to start my collection. I mean, technically, I did already own a few movies and shows, a few, not a lot, in terms of stuff that I would own. I mean, technically, the family has a whole thing of like VHSs and DVDs and whatnot. But speaking of which, if you're wondering, the movie that I actually started out that kind of made me start this collection, this may sound like an odd choice, is Persepolis, the French
Oh, nice.
animated film from 2007. Because it was around this time when I started to get into foreign or obscure animated films. Because obviously, growing up with Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks, you're more familiar with the mainstream stuff. It wasn't until around this time and maybe prior that I started really being interested in what other countries have to offer in terms of animation. So yeah,
It's a good choice.
yeah. I mean, I haven't seen this since I've watched it, so I'm definitely thinking about rewatching it soon. But yeah, that's
Do you I was gonna say you mentioned like Persepolis, but also like just taking that film class, like or that literature film class. Was there like any like movies in that class that like kind of like piqued your interest and like got you more invested in that, I guess, or is it like just the class in
um.
general that got you into it?
I guess it's just the class in general, because the movies we watched, if I remember correctly, we watched Fargo, we watched Annie Hall, The Elephant Man, which was, I think, my introduction to David Lynch. Rest in peace. Um, let's see, we watched The Kite Runner, which was probably my least favorite film, and it was good, but honestly, later on, I discovered Incendies by Denis Villeneuve, and I thought, yeah, this is a better version of The Kite Runner. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
we watched that. We watched The Shawshank Redemption. That was my first time seeing that movie, and I can see why it's considered one of the greatest films of all time. And we did watch Spirited Away, even though I saw that movie shortly before I took that class, believe it or not. So,
Oh,
so yeah,
nice. Well, that's like a nice breadth of types of films too.
yeah,
It kind of So I have fond memories myself. I had a couple of film classes, but I did communication in college, so I didn't specify on that, but it definitely was an interest of mine. So sounds like a nice class. Did you write anything on those papers, or did you like or on
um,
those movies, or do you
I
remember?
think what we did is that the teacher handed out like a sheet of paper that asked questions that we had to answer, like given our thoughts on certain themes, I guess the movie covered, or certain ideas. I don't remember the specifics because this was back in 2017, so it's a bit
Right,
while ago.
that's nearly 10 years ago now. So yeah, which
So
is kind of wild to think about.
I know.
Um, when did I guess so pivoting there, I guess to where like kind of what you're doing now. You had mentioned like Chris Stuckman and
Yeah,
channels like that, which similar to me, I was very much like watching his work and whatnot.
yeah.
Didn't you started putting your projects together for like for YouTube yourself and like watching other content creators, right?
Something like that. I mean, I guess it wasn't much later. And like I said, I mean, aside from the top 30 ones I just only started recently doing a couple years ago, I haven't done a whole lot else with that sort of thing. I mean, aside from these tribute videos, like they're just music videos that like my top 100 favorite movies. That was I did back in 2021. There was my top 100 favorite animated films I did in 2022. And before that, in 2020, I did my top 200 favorite war films because there's just so many war films I like and ones I
Yeah.
discovered in order to do that video. Um, and then there was last year for Memorial Day, I did sort of a little small video. It was like a 12-minute video, I think, where I did the top 10 best animated war movies. So
Yeah, I remember that video, and I also remember that that war series that you did, because yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of war movies out there.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, it's and yeah, well, you do wonderful work with it. So, um, yeah, so it's a good combination of putting those themes together. There, I think so. Um, is there anything currently you're doing? Obviously, you had mentioned some projects, but like, are you like currently watching anything or like making any content
Um,
that like you're pretty excited about?
well, I mentioned before I'm currently trying to work on the top 30 films of 1964. I've watched half of the films I've listed. Basically, I go on Letterbox and list off films that are considered the best or the ones that pique my interest. One movie I did recently watch I never seen. I don't have it because there's no physical release. It's on YouTube. It's called Welcome or No Trespassing. It's a Russian film that's directed by Elm Klimov. If that name sounds familiar, it's the same director of Come and See. It's an earlier film he did, and very different film from Come and See. Let's just say it's very Wes Anderson in terms of the humor. In fact, apparently Wes Anderson was inspired by this movie to make Moonrise Kingdom. So,
Okay.
but yeah, the full movie's on YouTube as of now. So, don't know if they'll ever get a physical release. Hopefully, Criterion will consider it. But
Yeah. Well, I was going to say somebody might pick it up. I mean, I feel like Deaf Crocodile might be able to pick that up or
yeah,
something. I don't know if you know that
funny
label.
you mentioned that. Funny you mentioned Deaf Crocodile. If there's one boutique label I've really been getting interested in, it's Deaf Crocodile, and it's simply because they've been distributing a lot of obscure animated films in their set, and I currently have all the ones that are available at the moment. In fact, if you've seen my last Blu-ray after video I did, my most recent pickup was Felidae, which is a film I've been really excited to get on physical media at last.
Yeah, I am sorely missing a lot of Deaf Crocodile releases, but no, I mentioned them because I knew you would know
Yeah,
because you've been collecting them.
yeah. Even though as of now there's only two of these anime films I've actually seen, being this, and that's mostly because I've seen this movie a few times years ago because this is one of the movies I used in Heroes vs. Villains season one. Um, but then the other film being the Pied Piper, the Czech stop motion animated film from 1986. Talk about a wild film that was.
Yeah, I've seen that one. So yeah, no, I remember. I think I watched that when I was like younger.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those weird movies. Like I had mentioned this before. Speaking of Czech movies, and you mentioned dinosaurs. You've seen the Journey to not Journey to the Beginning of Time, like the Carol Zeman.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, perfect. I knew that
Um,
would come up.
yeah, well, I have my first Criterion shelf is just right here in front of me. Yeah, actually, funny thing is, I knew about the movie before this because my cousin from Florida, he actually had the VHS of the movie, and I remember we watched it. We were kids, and at the time, I didn't realize it was a Czech film. And actually, it's funny how that happened a lot to me growing up because, funny little story is that while my parents did give me a lot of VHSs to watch because they knew I liked movies, especially animated stuff, I do remember owning a few animated films that are really obscure. And at the time, I didn't realize they were foreign films. Like there was this animated film involving a dog and rabbits called The Seventh Brother. It's from the 90s. It's a Hungarian film. And then there were a couple Russian animated films that I didn't realize were Russian films. There was one about whales called Samson and Sally, and the other was about a penguin called Scamper the Penguin, or at least that's the American title. The Russian title is like Lolo the Penguin. So
Hmm.
yeah, but
So you got those
yeah,
like early on. You said like
yeah. And again, I don't know how my mom found them. I'm assuming they were like at some thrift stores or something. I guess so. It's kind of funny how that works.
yeah. Well, yeah. It's odd that we both of us have very similar. At least we had similar experiences watching that Zeman movie early on, or at
Yeah,
least the American version, because I
yeah,
watched that as a kid as well, as on
yeah.
VHS.
I haven't watched the other two films yet. I mean, I will have to eventually. I heard they're really good.
Really fun.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Zeman, I heard he did. I think it was him, but I think he did his own film adaptation of The Sorcerer's Apprentice in the '70s. I think.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, definitely need to check that out. It might be on YouTube. Knowing obscure stuff like that might be on there. I'll have to find it. But
Yeah.
speaking of during the end of time, I actually did show that film to my family one day to see if they'd be interested in it. And let's just say my family, it's hard to get them to watch foreign films. Let's just it's kind of that sort
That
of
is
thing.
how it is. Yeah.
But my dad, I think he really enjoyed it, but I think he enjoyed it mostly for just the idea of the adventure aspect of these boys just going on adventure together, like camping and going, it's just that idea I guess he likes. Like it reminds him of the Sandlot in that aspect, if that makes any sense. Just boys like coming together to
Yeah, and just
do
going off
something.
doing something like
Yeah,
without like parents. Like that I remember doing that as a kid quite a bit, just
yeah,
going off at adventures and just showing up back at home. Who knows what we were up to though. So
yeah. Um, but yeah, aside from that, regarding 64 films, I'm actually doing, because like you, I do try to do challenges, like as a way, because when you own so many films and shows, and many of them you haven't even watched yet, you're thinking, what? How do I decide what I want to check out exactly? So I decided to do similar to the 31 Days of October, which I also did. I'm doing the 28 Days of February, where I picked 28 romance films that I own that I had yet to watch. So
well, nice. What? Yeah. How much? I guess this. By the time this is out for people watching this, what are some of the movies that you've already watched? I guess so far.
well, in terms of I've watched 5 films, obviously, because we're 5 days in February. For day one, I watched Modern Times, the Charlie Chaplin film, trying to get more into Charlie Chaplin. And yeah, I can see why this one is considered really good. It's a lot of fun, typical Charlie Chaplin, comedy, and a lot of
Hmm.
heart to it as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've seen, in terms of Chaplin films, I've seen this, The Great Dictator, The Kid, The Gold Rush, and I think my favorite so far has to be City Lights.
Okay. Yeah. Gold Rush is my favorite personally,
Yeah,
but
Gold Rush is
City
pretty
Lights
close.
is yeah. Honestly, you could pick any of those, and I wouldn't say a thing for that's not somebody's favorite.
Yeah, and for day two, I watched All That Heaven Allows, the Douglas Sirk
Ooh,
movie.
I love that
Um,
film.
Very brightly colored film for a 50s movie, I must say, but I guess that's what Douglas Sirk is known for, considering I saw this and his version of Imitation of Life from 1959.
Yeah,
So, yeah. And then
great
for
movie.
day three, I watched Billy Wilder's The Apartment.
Also great. Yeah,
Yep.
classic.
Yeah. Honestly, as of now, this might be my favorite so far, but there's still a few of those movies I've yet to see. Like, I still have yet to watch Sunset Boulevard. I have it, I just have yet to watch that. So, believe it or not, there's a lot of classics I still am behind on. So,
I'm the same way, man. I
yeah.
have quite a bit of stuff on
For
queue.
for day four, I watched Harold and Maude,
Also very
which
good.
quite a wild film, I must say. I'm not too familiar with this director, so as a way to introduce to his filmography, it's quite a
He's
crazy
a
one.
strange dude. Hal Ashby is a strange dude, but he makes some. I mean, it's the time period too. If you think about it, like the '70s, like a lot
Yeah,
of weird stuff was happening. I feel
it's
like.
it's just it's somehow what makes it both darkly hilarious, but also tragic in terms, because
Yeah,
you read the plot synopsis. I can imagine some people would be put off by this film, given the
the
main.
dynamics of it. Yeah,
Yeah, but it did surprisingly end up being a lot more heartfelt, and but also tragic at the same time when you really look into the characters.
yeah. There's some wholesomeness to it. But also at the same time, it's got this tragic undertone to it.
Yeah. And then for earlier today, I watched When Harry Met Sally,
Yeah,
which
one
was
of
a
the
lot of
best
fun, I
movies
must say.
of all time. So
Yeah. See, that's what I've watched so far. So
yeah, well, that's a great start. I mean, those are some stone cold classics. So a lot of them are too. And a lot of you said those are a lot of like those are all first time watches.
yeah, those are first time watches. That's the idea of this: is watch ones I've yet to watch, and there's surprisingly quite a few.
Yeah, well, good choices so far. I'm excited to kind of see the rest
Yeah.
as time progresses.
Yeah, I
Obviously, like I
will.
said, this will come out a little bit later, but I'm sure there's going to be some time here.
Yeah.
You were going to say?
I was just gonna say that. Actually, what was I gonna say? Okay. Um, like I don't know. Like, if you're wondering the order, by the way, I'm going by. I just picked 28 movies and I list them from oldest to newest in terms of release date. That's just makes the most sense to do that.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's the cool thing about it is too, and I mean, like you mentioned, we both kind of do challenges in a way to
yeah,
kind of tackle just the collection. But like, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. But like, whatever makes sense to you, and then also like whatever's fun for the person who's joining along you or like doing their own version of what you're doing. That like that's the fun part is like it's
right,
super customizable. You know.
right. And then that's in terms of movies. And then there's quite a few shows I'm also trying to catch up on too. Like mostly because when I did that top 100 favorite movies tribute video back in 2021, someone asked me in the comment section, "Do you plan to do the same thing for TV series?" And I said, "I am considering it, but there's just a lot I'm trying to catch up on." But like currently, I've started quite a few shows. Like I started watching Arrested Development. I have What We Do in the Shadows because I love the movie, and from what I've seen the show so far, it's really good.
Yeah, both are good.
And then there's the Netflix animated series Blue Eye Samurai. I've only watched the first episode, but already I'm hooked.
Yeah, that's a very unique like stylization. I quite like it too.
Which, speaking of which, this might be a good, interesting transition because I don't know if anyone here knows me. For those who don't know me well enough but are curious, you're probably wondering what's really got me into more mature animation exactly. Because obviously I grew up on, the more family-friendly stuff, and unfortunately, one of the more unfortunate things of being a fan of animation like myself is you have people around you thinking that animation is still kid stuff, even though that there's been adult animation since the 70s. I mean, well, you could make the argument even further back with things like Animal Farm.
Here. Yeah. Here's an adult animation right here.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like in recent years, we're now in a golden age of adult animation in terms of shows, because one of my biggest pet peeves with adult animation, at least in terms of television here in America, is a lot of them are just comedies. Like they're trying to be either Family Guy or South Park, and a lot of them are just clones and whatnot. And it's just, you do realize there's other genres you can be doing other than humor, right? It's like there's plenty of genres you can work with animation. So I'm glad that in recent years we're starting to get more diversity, and like outside of anime, obviously, but that's Japan. I'm talking here in America. We have things like Arcane and Invincible, Love, Death, and Robots, Primal, which is probably one of my favorite modern cartoons right now. The Genny Tartakovsky series.
Primal.
It's awesome. Honestly, it's the kind of show that I always dreamed of when it comes to a prehistoric type series. Just aim for a more mature audience. So, and it's the guy behind Samurai Jack, which you can actually see the box behind me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what streaming service is that one on?
I think it's HBO Max. I mean, for me, I have both season 1, 2 on Blu-ray, so I have them.
Yeah.
I have yet to watch season 2. I need to, and I can't wait for season 3, which apparently is starting a new story because I guess this is an anthology series, is what it is. So
okay, yeah.
But in terms of adult animated films, like it is kind of annoying that it seems like in order for an animated film to be successful, it has to be G or PG to get a mainstream release. Very rare do we get a PG-13 or R. I mean, occasionally we do, like with Isle of Dogs back in 2018, and before that, Sausage Party in 2016, which I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I mean, honestly though, I was lucky. The previous year, I got to see Memoir of a Snail in theaters. It was only playing for one night in the theater close by.
Yeah.
But yeah, such a good movie. It was definitely my favorite film of last year. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, those movies like that obviously are nominated for like award seasons a lot of the times, and the reason that being, and that's usually when I like hear about those types of movies, and luckily I have a local cinema that has a night or like a week of showing those. But I never got around to it, but I wanted to see that movie. The only movie I watched last year was Flow, which I really enjoyed.
That was such a good movie. I still need to watch the director's first movie he did called Away, which I think is currently on Amazon Prime right now. So I'll definitely have to check that out. Apparently, that movie he worked completely on his own. That was a solo project for him. So, but yeah, Flow was a beautiful experience in the cinema. So
yeah, I have good memories with that one. So, I guess transitioning here a little bit to thinking about like some of your favorite movies, like is there like some representations of some of like your favorite things that you would like showcase that would represent you, like to people who are watching this?
I don't know some of them could represent me. There's a couple, but really it's just films I personally enjoy and films that I like. Let's see. For example, if y'all have seen my video I did for my top 100 favorite films of 2021, really my top 10 hasn't changed that much. Like, for example, of course, I love Alien. I know it's an obvious classic. For me, it's probably my favorite horror film of all time. Even though my dad, he and I kind of argue, he debates whether this is a horror film. And I'm thinking, yes, it's a horror film. I mean, it's
a horror film.
it's basically Jaws in space, essentially. So,
Yeah.
and speaking of which, I didn't really get into the horror genre until I was, I guess, in college, I suppose, because when I started really getting into film, I decided to finally get into the horror genre to see what all the hype is, and I've discovered quite a few new favorites. Between this and Psycho, The Thing, even some animated ones like Perfect Blue have become my favorites.
Yeah.
So
I just watched that for the first time last year. My
you
God,
can see,
what a great movie!
yeah, you can see some similarities to that and Black Swan in a way.
Oh
At least
yeah, I hadn't even thought of that.
that was the controversy at the time when Black Swan came out. People accused Darren Aronofsky for ripping off Perfect Blue, even though I believe he bought the rights to that movie to make Black Swan or something like that. So personally, I liked Perfect Blue more, but Black Swan's really good too. So
Yeah, I like both of them. So I mean,
yeah.
Perfect Blue is the better movie, though. I agree.
Yeah. But another favorite of mine is my favorite Wes Anderson film, probably one of my favorite comedies, and that is Fantastic Mr. Fox.
That's a perfect
Just,
movie.
I don't know why. For me, this is just one of those comfort films, I guess. Like one of those films I just need to put on if I want to be in a more lighthearted mood. But yeah, and for me, I like to think of this as a Thanksgiving movie, even though okay, it might not be Thanksgiving, but it has that autumn feel, and they have a turkey scene, and it's just, and there aren't that
Yeah.
many great Thanksgiving movies anyway. So
Yeah, I would argue that I agree. I think that definitely like fits the role of a Thanksgiving movie because the colors are there. So
yeah. And of course, I've already talked enough about this movie, but Jurassic Park is in my top 10. It's in terms of just a fun, adventure type movie. Like in terms of summer blockbusters, it's my favorite. I mentioned before it's my favorite 1993 release and my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. And I still think it's insane he released this and Schindler's List the same year. It's
yeah, that's rather nuts to think about.
And then of course my favorite war film being Grave of the Fireflies, which I believe this Blu-ray is now out of print. So
You and me
yeah.
both have it, so we're good. So
Yeah, we're good. But unless G Kids decides to finally distribute this film, so
I think mine's over here somewhere.
yeah,
Yep, there it is. There it is.
But yeah, it's even Roger Ebert declares this one of the greatest war films of all time, and a film that will change the way people view animation.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend if anyone who's watching this right now like hasn't seen that movie, and if you are of the mindset that like animation is not something you've taken super seriously per se, that's the movie I definitely would recommend to watch.
Between this and another Japanese anime film that's set during World War II, Barefoot Gen, or is it Gen? Barefoot Gen? Barefoot Gen? Something like that.
I don't know about that one.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I haven't.
I have the Blu-ray, but holy cow, does that film not hold back? It's in terms of the bombing. It's wow.
Yeah, when did that come out?
1983, the first film.
Okay.
It got a sequel in '86, and the Blu-ray comes with both films.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's something I got to add to my queue. So
yeah, if I think it's still available. I mean, I don't know. Anime Blu-rays go out of print way too quickly. So
yeah, that's the other thing too is like, and I don't think we've necessarily touched on it, but like there's the anime fans who I think a lot of those fans, and there's a lot of crossover obviously, but like those are like almost like horror fans now in terms of like physical media. They're like ravenous, and there's like they just buy it almost immediately.
yeah,
Right.
Right. And then another favorite, which is my favorite Stanley Kubrick film, and that is A Clockwork Orange.
That's a fun one.
Yeah,
fun. Well, maybe not the right word. So
no, I mean, granted, I haven't seen this movie in years, but I do have a pretty good memory of it. But then again, I still have not seen all of Kubrick's films. So based on the ones I've seen, between this and Paths of Glory are my personal favorites. So
underrated movie, Paths of Glory.
Yeah. And then let's see, where's everything? And of course, another favorite of mine, my favorite Disney film being Fantasia, which I do have which I have the this Blu-ray, the one that's hard to find because, like you, I had the UK Blu-ray. I think that's what that is. That has the two films separated. One. I had it, but then I saw this was on sale, and maybe this is just my OCD, but I try to keep things consistent with the rest of the Disney films. So
that's fair.
Also, it's thinner, so that's less space to put on the shelf. So
Does it have 2000 with it too?
Yeah, it comes with 2000.
Oh, nice.
But honestly, if there's any Disney film I would love to see in theaters again, it would be Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and then this. Like if they ever show in
Yeah,
theater, I would love to go see it. And
me too. I don't feel like enough people. I mean, I would love to like. I mean, are you near like an Alamo Draft House? Like, what's your theater situation like?
I don't really have anything like that. My theaters are, for the most part, your typical theaters. I mean, like the closest I
AMC,
have is the one. What is it?
like an AMC or something.
Oh yeah, we have an AMC, and they'll occasionally. That's the theater I went to see Memoir of a Snail. I had to go to a farther theater to see Flow, and then the closest theater we have, they don't usually play independent foreign stuff for the most part. Very rarely. I think the only time they did was Parasite, but that was like one of the biggest movies of that year. So
Right. I mean, it won the Oscar, so yeah.
yeah. And then another one of my all-time favorites, a movie that really got me into Korean cinema. I'm talking about Old Boy. So
Yeah. Speaking of Korean cinema, yeah,
yeah.
great stuff.
By the way, if you're wondering why I own two copies, this was the first copy I owned. And when I found out that Neon was releasing this package, it's such a cool packaging they gave it. Also, I did not realize this was only a 4K release. It doesn't come with a Blu-ray disc. And we did get a 4K TV for Christmas. We just don't have a 4K player. So I just have these two for now. So
Yeah.
But
Well, it's a great movie to have two copies of. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess when films you absolutely adore and your absolute favorites, I guess those are the films you double dip on. So
yeah, like I have Watership Down here, like on Criterion and the BFI. I know for me, like Pan's Labyrinth is something I have like 3 copies of.
Yeah.
So,
and in terms of my top 3 favorite films of all time, for third place, I have, and we mentioned Memoir of a Snail, but the director's previous film, Mary and Max. So
that's a great one. I haven't thought about that movie in so long.
This movie just meant so much to me as someone who has Asperger's syndrome, and I just feel like there aren't that many great films that depict autism and people on the spectrum in a very honest way, per se. Now, granted, I still have not seen Ocean Heaven. I don't know if you've heard of that movie.
I haven't.
I mean, I have it. It's like a Mandarin film, but it's a story about a father and his autistic son, I guess, and something about an aquarium, I guess. But I've heard really good things about that movie, so I'll have to check it out. It's a Well Go USA title, so.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, for most people, when they talk about films that deal with people on the spectrum, this is often considered the best one. And out of the ones I've seen, I can definitely say why. But
yeah, I haven't like I said, I haven't seen that in so long. Did that come out in like the mid 2000s?
it was 2009.
Okay, so it was the end of 2000.
Or as me, along with most people in the animation community, like to call the greatest year of animation, because so many great animated films and such a diversity came out the year. Between this, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Up, Coraline, The Secret of Kells, The Princess and the Frog,
Holy
A
moly,
Town
yeah.
Called Panic. So,
yeah.
But yeah. In terms of my second favorite film is Pan's Labyrinth.
Hey,
which, yep,
you just mentioned.
Yep. This honestly, I'll be honest, I was once kind of that stage where I was a bit hesitant to watch foreign language films, to be honest. I mean, granted, I did watch some anime and, subs, but it wasn't until I finally decided to check this film out because it looked really interesting to me and it really gave me an appreciation to check out films from other countries. So, and also helped me discover one of my favorite directors, Guillermo del Toro. So,
yeah. There's a perfection to that movie. So
yeah, it's definitely someone on YouTube made a video essay on this movie and they described it as a disobedient fairy tale, which is a really creative way of describing this movie because it's a fairy tale, but this is not like your typical like fairy tale. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of elements. I mean, I've seen it probably, I don't know, like 15 times, and that's probably not an understatement. But I feel like I learn something new every time I watch it.
Yeah. Honestly, like Del Toro, I haven't seen all of his movies. I've seen that. I've seen his Pinocchio movie, which I absolutely loved. I got to see that in theaters before it got on Netflix.
I wasn't able to see that in theaters, so that sounds like a good treat.
Yeah, it was. And honestly, it surprised me it took me that long for him to direct an animated film, considering he has worked on animation in the past. He was a producer for The Book of Life. There's that Netflix series, The Tales of Arcadia, which I still need to get around watching. I've heard it's really good. So, So, but then again, it took Steven Spielberg how long until he finally directed an animated film with the Adventures of Tintin? So, and he worked
Yeah.
on a lot of animation stuff in the '90s. So,
Yeah, eventually they'll go back to their childhood a little bit. I feel
yeah,
like I feel like they touch on that aspect, and like, I'm sure growing up, like I know for a fact Del Toro, obviously with a lot of stop motion stuff and like
yeah.
Frankenstein and thinking about those kind of things. So yeah, it's cool to kind of see that. I like that kind of light. And did you have? You said what are you queuing up for number one now?
Yeah, yeah, I am. And of course, it's Spirited Away. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but honestly, my top four could either be number one. It's just kind of a toss up between those. But funny enough, they're all from the 2000s. I don't know what it is about the 2000 decade that a lot of the movies from that time period I love. So, but maybe it just reminds me of a simpler time of cinema. So,
Yeah, uh, that's an amazing movie right there.
but yeah, it's. I mean, there's a reason it's considered one of, if not the greatest animated film of all time. I mean, some people call it a movie they love so much that they hate it, like they're jealous that they themselves couldn't create something this imaginative. But it definitely deserved to win Best Animated Picture in its year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I describe that movie as scrumptious. Maybe
I
I'm
mean,
thinking too much of the food,
so there is something
but
about anime and how it depicts food that it looks delicious. Like a little off topic, but there was an anime. I didn't watch a lot of anime as a kid, but one anime I do recall watching was Dinosaur King, which basically was kind of a Pokemon knockoff. But then again, can you call it a knockoff given this was an era of all these anime about children collecting monsters? It's just
yeah,
I just remember there was an episode where the kids are trying to chase down an Allosaurus. And then I guess there was like some sort of meat festival or something. And the way they portrayed the ham, it just looks so delicious. Like, you know,
yeah. They do definitely know how to make things more more appetizing just visually. Usually like with like the steam and just like
yeah,
the way that like they I don't know, like it's the way they like draw the little like sweat stains and like the little like maybe the marble in the meat or something.
yeah.
So
But as you probably can imagine regarding my collection, I'm pretty much with you. Is my collection is not your typical like in terms of like most your typical people when they have a collection, it's usually whatever popular movie there is. But with me and people like you and YMS and a few others, we try to collect films from all decades or all countries or just have a variety, you know? In fact, I think the oldest thing I do currently own in terms of, well, it's not a movie, but it's a collection of short films. Of course, I'm talking about the works of Georges Méliès, Georges, A Trip to the Moon and
yeah,
all that. But yeah, first Wizard of Cinema, 1896 to 1913, 173 rare and rediscovered original films.
yeah. I haven't seen. I've only seen Trip to the Moon. Actually, I haven't seen any of his other earlier works.
Yeah, I believe
But
most, if not all of them, you can find on YouTube. But I just thought it would be really cool to own this set. So I'm into DVD, but it's still cool to have.
yeah.
If you want to talk a feature length movie that I own, that's the oldest. It's the 1911 film Dante's Inferno.
Oh, okay.
So
What's is that on Kino or something?
it's Terror Vision. I actually had to order this
Oh
on their
yeah,
website. I don't know if you can
yeah.
still get it because I got it with its slipcover. So
Oh, nice.
talk
Is
about a
it?
crazy film. I first saw this movie on YouTube, so a
Yeah,
very wild film to come out of the 1910s. But then again, a lot of wild stuff came out that decade. I mean, Birth of a Nation. Yeah.
yeah. Talk about some controversy there. I was gonna say, does that movie is that kind of along the lines of like Faust and like Haxan in a way? Like,
Kinda in
yeah,
terms of the visual, because if you know the story of Dante's Inferno about the man who goes to the 7 levels of hell to I guess save
right.
his loved one, something like that. But yeah, it's a pretty wild film to say in terms of visuals, like how they made this that far back in film history. It's
Yeah, I was gonna say you have me beat in terms of some movies that like go past that point.
yeah.
Do you have another one you're gonna show?
No, no. Well, I was just going to bring up. You mentioned earlier. I know we're kind of past this, but you mentioned what other movies are you currently watching this month?
Yeah,
Aside from what I've already mentioned, I'm trying to catch up on the Oscar nominees, like if I
yeah,
can.
yeah,
Like yesterday, my brother and I went to see A Complete Unknown because it was only playing for a couple more nights. So, and I liked it. I'm a bit iffy when it comes to music biopics, to be honest. Like the
yeah.
last 2 years that were nominees, Maestro and Elvis, I thought were both fine. I mean,
This is definitely better than those two.
Yeah.
Though I agree
Yeah, I
on
liked it.
that.
Even though I'm not that familiar with Bob Dylan, I thought it was a pretty solid film. I thought Timothy Chalamet was pretty good. I really wanted to see it because James Mangold directed it, and I've liked some of the stuff he's made with Logan and Ford v Ferrari. But
Yeah.
I've seen those. Those are the only Best Picture nominees I've seen, and I'm trying to catch up on the others. I do currently have two of them, being Wicked and The Substance. So I have these
Excellent.
two to
Yeah.
check out.
Well, very different films, of
Yeah,
course.
but yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna see I'm Still Here or Nickel Boys because they're not playing anywhere close by. So
I was able to. I luckily I saw Nickel Boys this past weekend.
hmm,
I was lucky. Like I said, I have the Alamo Draft House. I mean, it's. I don't know if it's playing anymore, but it's like it's a
yeah,
limited release. But
right.
hopefully, it'll come out on streaming in some sort for people. So
I
maybe.
will say I was right in my prediction of which animated films will be nominated. So
Well, you have your finger on the. I feel like you have your finger on the pulse a little bit better than maybe the general populace
yeah,
because like it's
well,
like
it's
it's
not
a
just
passion of yours.
I mean it's not just me. If you look at articles on predictions, most of them had those same five films, and as of now, I've seen three out of those five. So I still need to watch Inside Out 2 and Wallace and Gromit: Avenge the Most Foul. So which I do
I
have
still haven't
Inside
yet
Out.
see those
I
myself.
mean, I have Inside Out 2, so I have that, and of course, Wallace and Gromit is on Netflix,
Yeah.
so definitely need to check that out.
Well, as we were like, coming together with like, I mean, obviously current things going on with Oscar movies and whatnot. What's the current state of cinema for you, like in terms of what this like medium means to you, like and like just thinking about like your past with it, but like just your current trajectory of where you're going with it.
Um, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I mean, like, honestly, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'll be honest, I'm guilty of this as well, is when people say there are no good movies anymore. Um, like every decade has its gold and its turd. You could say like if every decade's going to have that, and I get that Hollywood has changed a lot over the years, or well, for better for worse. That's all depends. Because there's still good stuff being pumped out, like Oppenheimer or Top Gun Maverick or the
Right.
Batman, stuff like that. But I will say nowadays, because as an animation fan specifically, I find myself more looking forward to whatever the independent or foreign crowd has to pump out than what mainstream studios are. Because I honestly, like most people, I'm kind of let down what Disney and Pixar has become in recent years. I mean, every now and then they put out something good, but it just seems rare and rare nowadays.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think there's, like you said, like there's that adage of people saying like there's nothing good coming out, but honestly, you're just not looking at the whole picture. And the whole
Yeah,
picture
like
is the world.
yeah. You know what's funny is when I show my parents my top 30 list videos of whatever year, they are shocked with how many foreign films I put on there, and I'm thinking that's because when I do these lists, I try to look at the whole picture and not just what America has to pump out. So,
Yeah,
so
as you should. It makes it more interesting. More,
yeah,
I mean, there's so many. I mean, like we brought up like the Czech movies. Like so
yeah.
those are some of like the most interesting movies of those that time periods that those things come out because it was super transgressive. Like if you're thinking about the other movies that came out, like especially like in America during that time, that there's so many things you can get from that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen some Czech films recently, particularly like the film Little Otik, which I mentioned in my favorite films of the year 2000. That's a wild film right there. It's
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was gonna say, as we're like kind of wrapping this up, do you have any final thoughts about like where people can find you, but also like just your love of movies and like what movies mean to you at this moment.
well, obviously my username is the same as below, so just type that. You should find my channel. Like I said, I haven't done a whole lot recently, but I'm trying to. I have some ideas for future projects. Like, well, mainly the stuff I'm currently doing. Between the best films of the year, I really need to get back to Heroes vs Villains because I got some fans who keep asking me when the next round's coming out. It's just again, it's just a lot going on, but
Sure.
that and I have a few ideas of projects I want to do. Like this one idea I had because of my love for animation, I was thinking about doing videos where I rank animated films from each decade, like as far back to the old days to current days. I kind of got the idea based on movie timelines. That YouTube channel, he does the 80s project or 50s project or whatever decade project. He does it for horror and sci-fi. I think I'm doing something similar, but for animation.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun endeavor to tackle. Honestly, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
the thing that I like quite enjoy about your channel, and then also just like the focus that you have is just thinking about it from these like yearly perspectives, but also like just tackling it in a way that I think like is cohesive too. Like kind of going back to like what the story, like the plots that you put into like these heroes versus villains.
yeah.
Um, it's just like a really creative way to tackle something like this, where I feel like everyone has their own spin on things. So I appreciate what you do, Chris.
Thanks.
So.
I will say when I do eventually start that series, it's going to be one of those things where it starts out as it's by decade, because obviously the first episode will be, I'm going to combine the 1910s, 20s, and 30s in one video because there's not a whole lot from those time periods, obviously.
Right.
And then 40s, 50s, and I think the 60s, I'll be able to tackle in one video. But then starting the 70s and onward, it's going to be one of those things where I'm going to have to give each individual year their own video. So,
yeah, I was going to say it's going to start proliferating, and it's going to get more. There's going to be a lot more movies to talk about, I'm sure. So
yeah.
Well,
so
yeah,
but yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do something like this again in the future.
absolutely, man. I was going to say, for people watching at home, be sure to check out Chris over at CKprimeval07, the full title, but that link will be down in the description. But also be sure to reach out to us in the comment section, and talk about some of your movie memories, and talk about this film journey. We love to hear from you. So again, thank you, Chris, for jumping on and joining. It's good to finally like talk to you after all these years. So
Yep, it's been great too.
yeah. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will talk to you all soon. And as always, I'm not jonesing around.